There was a time when grocery store aisles felt like treasure chests. Every trip with your parents meant the possibility of discovering something new, something bold, something that tasted like it was designed specifically for the taste buds of a kid growing up in America during the 1980s and 1990s. Those decades were arguably the most creative and experimental era in American food history. Companies were willing to take risks, flavors were pushed to their limits, and marketing was so powerful that entire generations formed emotional bonds with products that no longer exist. The snacks, cereals, drinks, and fast food items from that era were not just food, they were cultural touchstones, afternoon rituals, and lunchbox status symbols. And then, one by one, they disappeared. Some were pulled due to poor sales, others fell victim to changing health trends or corporate restructuring. A few simply vanished without explanation, leaving loyal fans confused and heartbroken. What remains is a deep, collective nostalgia for flavors that can never quite be replicated, no matter how many copycat recipes surface online. This is a journey back through those lost foods, the ones that defined a generation and left a permanent mark on American food culture. Few things defined a childhood morning in the 1980s and 1990s more powerfully than a bowl of cereal in front of Saturday morning cartoons. And the cereals of that era were unlike anything on shelves today. Oreo O's, the cereal that tasted exactly like eating crushed Oreo cookies swimming in milk, was a breakfast dream that General Mills and Post brought to life in 1998. Kids went absolutely wild for it, and parents reluctantly accepted it as part of the morning routine. It was discontinued in the United States in 2007, and while it briefly returned in limited form, it never recaptured its original glory. Then there was Waffle Crisp, a cereal from Post that genuinely tasted like tiny maple syrup-soaked waffles. It was warm, sweet, and comforting in a way that felt almost magical for a cold weekday morning. Discontinued and brought back multiple times, it exists now only in the memories of those who grew up pouring it into oversized bowls. Sprinkle Spangles from General Mills featured star-shaped pieces covered in rainbow sprinkles and had a genie mascot that made the whole experience feel festive. It lasted only a few years in the early 1990s before disappearing entirely. These cereals were not just breakfast. They were the first decision of the day, and choosing the right box felt like a genuine act of personal expression. The lunchbox was a sacred space in the 1980s and 1990s, and the snacks packed inside it carried serious social weight. Planters Cheez Balls were perhaps the most iconic of all discontinued snack foods from this era. Those bright orange puffed cheese balls, packed in a distinctive canister, were a staple at parties, after-school snack sessions, and road trips across America. When they were discontinued in 2006, the internet had not yet fully developed its collective grieving voice, but the loss was felt deeply. Nabisco's Dunkaroos, the kangaroo-themed snack that came with cookies and a small container of frosting for dipping, became one of the most beloved treats of the 1990s. Kids would trade their lunch items just to get their hands on a pack. Though technically a Canadian product that returned to American shelves in 2020, the original formulation and the magic of finding it in your lunchbox as a child remains irreplaceable. Jell-O Pudding Pops were another casualty of the era. Bill Cosby's advertisements made them a household name, and their creamy, frozen chocolate and vanilla flavors were the perfect after-school reward. They were discontinued in the early 1990s, and while Popsicle brand attempted to revive them, fans insisted the texture and taste were never quite the same. These snacks were more than food. They were the currency of childhood friendship. Fast food in the 1980s and 1990s was a completely different universe. Chains were experimenting wildly, and some of their most beloved creations were eventually pulled from menus, leaving fans with nothing but memories and the occasional online petition. McDonald's McDLT was a burger that came in a divided styrofoam container, keeping the hot side hot and the cool side cool. It was revolutionary in concept, and Jason Alexander, before his Seinfeld fame, even starred in a musical commercial for it. It was discontinued in 1991, primarily due to environmental concerns over the styrofoam packaging. Burger King's Satisfries were a lower-calorie crinkle-cut alternative to regular fries introduced in 2013, but rooted in the spirit of 1990s innovation. They were discontinued within a year due to poor sales, but they represented the era's obsession with reinventing classic comfort food. Taco Bell's Enchirito, a hybrid of an enchilada and a burrito topped with red sauce, olives, and cheese, was a menu staple that came and went multiple times. Its loyal fan base never stopped demanding its return. Pizza Hut's Priazzo, a deep-dish Italian-style pie that was more like a savory-filled pastry than a traditional pizza, was available throughout the mid-1980s and was considered one of the most ambitious fast food items ever created. These menu items were bold experiments that connected deeply with the people who loved them. The beverage landscape of the 1980s and 1990s was equally adventurous, and several drinks from that period have achieved legendary status in their absence. Surge, the citrus-flavored soft drink from Coca-Cola, was introduced in 1996 as a direct competitor to Mountain Dew. It was intensely sweet, neon green, and marketed aggressively toward teenagers with extreme sports imagery. It was discontinued in 2003, but a dedicated online campaign called Surge Movement eventually convinced Coca-Cola to bring it back in limited quantities. Still, the original Surge experience, cracking open a cold can after school in 1997, belongs to a specific moment in time that cannot be fully recreated. Clearly Canadian, the sparkling, fruit-flavored water that came in those iconic teardrop-shaped bottles, was a staple of 1990s convenience store runs. It felt sophisticated and refreshing in a way that plain soda did not, and its gentle carbonation made it feel like a treat. High-C Ecto Cooler, the citrus drink tied to the Ghostbusters franchise, was a lunchbox legend throughout the late 1980s and into the 1990s. Its Slimer green color and tangy flavor made it instantly recognizable. It was discontinued in 2001, but returned briefly during the 2016 Ghostbusters reboot. Squeeze It, the squeezable fruit drink bottles that kids could drink directly by squeezing, were a physical experience as much as a flavor one. These drinks were not just beverages, they were part of the sensory memory of growing up in that era. The grief people feel over discontinued foods is not trivial or silly. Food scientists and psychologists have long understood that taste and smell are among the most powerful triggers of autobiographical memory. When you bite into something that tastes exactly like a food from your childhood, your brain does not just recall the flavor. It reconstructs the entire emotional context of that moment. The living room carpet, the sound of the television, the feeling of a Saturday with nothing to worry about. When those foods disappear, they take a piece of that emotional access with them. The 1980s and 1990s were also a uniquely optimistic time in American consumer culture. The economy was expanding, marketing was becoming increasingly sophisticated, and food companies were genuinely trying to delight consumers rather than simply sustain them. The products from that era reflected a kind of creative ambition that felt personal. They were designed to be fun, to be memorable, to be the best part of an ordinary day. Today's food landscape, while broader and more health-conscious, often lacks that same sense of playful invention. The discontinued foods from those decades represent something larger than themselves. They are edible artifacts of a specific cultural moment, a time when a trip to the grocery store felt like an adventure, and the right snack could make any afternoon feel extraordinary. That is why we still miss them, and that is why we always will.